Is that a responsibility of government as well to make that trickle down?
Yes, because the vehicle that will make that happen is the media, and government to a large extent regulates and controls media. I mean, you guys are private, but listen up. If the government says, channels television and says to my John Momo, I need 30 minutes a day, give 30 minutes a day, dedicate that to this cause. We want to drive this agenda. I mean, there are the young Nigerians that are going to, what does greatness mean to you? And we go back to that process and say, oh, greatness is this. And you play that back by sound, rhymes, and what have you. You will find out that the kids will now grow and we begin to sing those songs, and then we take it up and the adults imbibe it. Anyone that runs contrary to that defined space, that will infiltrate and do it's all about behaviors. Does something different, they're going to say, hey, they'll spot you and say, no. Then that's where accountability sets in. But we can't, work without that process.
If this were to happen, at that level of families, where they begin to tell themselves and the world, look, this is how we need to go. Yeah. And then they hit the streets and see maybe a convoy plying one way. And then they see the police plying one way. And the child sees it and says, look, what are people telling us? Look at the people who are supposed to do this kind of things.
Absolutely. And there's a part to it also. The same hand we are creating must also have this other hand about consequences. Consequence management, without that, carrot and stick, I mean, it's like talking about Neymar. It's a double-fisted leadership. On one hand, you have a sword. On the other hand, you're building skills. You can't do one in isolation of the other. I mean, yesterday I was coming out of the bank, EcoBank headquarters, and there was this army sergeant was driving right on the lane against traffic. And I looked at this man, staff sergeant, and I said, because he's in a military uniform, he would do that. And nobody would challenge him. Why? Because the uniform he's wearing is a symbol of authority. I mean, there shouldn't be discussions when a man violates that single principle. There should be consequence. But rather than do that, we cover it and say, oh, he's my brother, he's my sister. We are all brothers and sisters. I mean, nobody created enemies. God didn't create enemies from day one. Do you understand? And I think it's the lack of consequence management, and that's allowed stuff to be so loose. I don't believe that poverty will make a man condescend to the point where truth cannot emanate from his lips. The only day your voice gets dimmed or muted is like your remote control on your television. The day you mute it, it's because of compromise. And compromise comes in a lot of ways. It means you've sold something in exchange and you can't voice it. And I think that's where we are. But to my mind.
How do you think we got it wrong? Or where?
Chamberlain, it's something that beats my imagination, because I always tell people that I was born, bred, mayonnaise, jammed, buttered, and everything, in Lagos here. And I grew up, living in Surulere with my parents. I grew up, attended Baptist Academy, went on to Federal School of Arts and Science, to University of Uyo. And I didn't know what it was to go abroad. I didn't have that luxury. But here I am today, I'm sitting down, but the fundamental values started from the home. My parents, my dad and my mom, our parents made sure that, Mampoe, I saw your dad, was very proud of you the other day. And they did all they could to create that entity, because they believed in the value of the name. And every brand has a name. We all come, nobody's an appendage. We all have names. And those names have to speak for something. But these days,
that used to be an African thing.
Yeah, it is.
Even in our culture, they always tell you, remember the name you carry. But
they remember whose son you are. Then the first thing they ask you, who's your father? I mean, then way back, you could walk on the streets and do something contrary, and then you'll see someone who is actually not your dad or mom will give you a good spank and take you home, or come to tell your dad that, listen, I saw your son do. It's again the communal, the sense of responsibility, accountability. The process of building a brand starts with a product. If you don't have a good product, forget it.
So for instance, I would have asked you, those children you saw strolling to school, do you think that if you had stopped to say, Would you run to school now, my friend?
Makwe, I've done it over and over.
What's the response?
Tell me, you know one thing, I don't even know if one of my assistants who's been with me for like 20-something odd years, is my driver, he'll be watching this and be laughing. Each time I ask him, I say, Celestine, stop. And I'll head down and I say to these children, do you realize they're going to school? And some of them, 30% look so dirty and scarred. And you wonder if they're coming out of homes. And I say, where are their parents? They'll tell you, oh, that nobody takes, but those are the leaders of tomorrow. Let's not, when the youths wake up today and say we want to get into leadership, it starts from self-discipline. You know, if you are a good leader of self, you can then lead others, and then you become a leader of leaders. That's a trajectory that leadership takes. But today, self-discipline, you can see it. You will see a man that is, well, a woman that is disciplined, that is a self-leader. We need to start building self-leadership, and it takes, I mean, that's, you know, I was listening to the Honorable Minister yesterday, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, and, you know, the National Orientation Agency is one vehicle that we can actually also use. I mean, there are several agencies, and the corporate sector, the private sector are doing theirs, and all kinds are happening. And it has to be all hands on deck, but somebody has to put it out there. So, for instance, you talked about the late campaign that late Dora put together. It was a good effort, but it was jettisoned largely because people didn't believe in it, and not because they didn't. You know why they didn't believe in it? They didn't understand it. Without understanding, a man can't do anything. Without understanding, so we need to build it.
Just wondering though, what is the response of the children usually? Do they run to school? Do they,
no,
are they confrontational?
Different reactions. I tell you, they normally work in groups. So you have a group of 5, and then you come down and say, "Do you realize you're late? You're supposed to go to school." And someone else says, "Sorry, sir," you know, and then they start running. And then you now look at one. There will always be one that would say, "What's his business? He can't be." And then you look at him and say, "Would you?" And he will just smile, you know, because you can't spank him. You can't, you know, do that. But my son can't do that. Trust me. By the time he's even getting close to 7:30, he knows that he should be somewhere. And that's where we need to start from. So abdicating the responsibility to the government is not right. I think the institutions we have to be strengthened. I mean, I don't know if you were a Boy Scout. We had the Red Cross, we had the Boy Scout, we had the Girl Guide then. Those were institutions that helped form. And the Rotary. You know, the other day I had the privilege of I was invited by the Rotary to speak at one of their district meetings. And I said, with due respect, that I think the Rotary organization has missed it. And they all looked at me and I said, why? I said, this man standing before you was a retractor. But you have no trace that I was a retractor. And the 4-way test was something that I imbibed in and I took on very well. But by the time I got to university, I fizzled out. I said, you know why? Because you focus so much on polio and those things, which are great, but you forget that you actually started building an army of young ones. The JCs, all of those institutions and clubs helped form values. And that's why I talked about social capital. It's what we have in deficit, and we need to find a way to up that ante.
You know, speaking about focus on how we need to move or where we got it wrong, Noye here says, we got it wrong in the early 90s when both father and mother had to leave kids at home to make ends meet.
Well, I don't think it was. I wouldn't really put it at a stick in time, you know, frankly, because. But I would say to you, if I were to take a little gaze in my, you know, retro view, I would say, you know, it all depends on where you are looking from, your lens. So if you're coming from, say, for instance, my village in Idy Enang, was there a time that people, you'd think the father and mother, because of the level of literacy, the father and mother, they just know that you have to go to school. Now, it's a different case if you get there and don't come back. You don't come with your reports. They don't know, but they know they've sent you to school. Now, come to a Lagos, cosmopolitan. Dad and mom will leave to go to work. Okay, my parents were civil servants. They will go to work, and I'll find my way, you know, walk to school. The evidence of my preparation over time is a report card. And when that report card comes, it tells whether you've been walking to school or driving or sailing.
But these days, what JAM tells us is different. JAM says they see parents trying to bring microchips for their words. And this is shocking to a lot of people.
That actually, because if you see that those generation of parents are the ones that started in the early 80s that started reading from, the back door. I don't know if you watch the movie, different people come in, some come through the window and some come through the door. And that's what they will fester. And we need to now say, my mentor says something very profound. He says, if you want to know that a stick is not straight, put a straight one beside it. If a stick is crooked, the only way to know that and tell someone that it is crooked, put a straight one beside it. It's so visible. That's why we have eyes.
Food for thought. Mr. Idy Enang, brand specialist, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Chamberlain. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
And I will hope that they will imbibe that. And let's try that, one stick beside the other one. You never can tell what you'll find.
The question is who's going to be the example, I think. Well,
The stick.
Yeah.
The straight one.
who will be the
Not
straight
just the
stick?
putter, the steak. Well, thank you very much indeed for watching the show today. We appreciate all of you. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
Thank you so much for your contributions. Maokwe Ogun.
Many thanks. I'm Slyman Alede.